Mark had always dreamed of owning a lake house. Nestled on the serene shores of Crystal Lake, the quaint home was his sanctuary, a place where the hum of city life faded into the peaceful rhythm of water lapping against the dock. Every summer, Mark escaped here to recharge, savoring early mornings with coffee on the porch and evenings under the stars. This year, he had planned a long weekend retreat, a chance to finally relax after months of stress at work. The house was spotless, the lawn freshly mowed, and he locked the door behind him, confident everything would be just as he left it. But just 2 days into his trip, strange messages started pouring in. Texts from neighbors asking if he was aware of the people staying at his house. Mark's heart sank. He tried to brush it off as some mistake or miscommunication. After all, his HOA rules were crystal clear. No unauthorized rentals, no exceptions. Yet, the nagging feeling refused to fade. Curiosity and unease gnawed at him as more messages arrived. Photos of unfamiliar cars parked along his driveway, neighbors complaining about late-night noises and parties. Mark's gut twisted. Who could be in his home? He tried calling the HOA office, but the line went unanswered. He emailed the board, but no replies came. Back at Crystal Lake, his house sat silent, but Mark pictured it filled with strangers, violating the very peace he had fought to preserve. The thought was unbearable. As the sun set behind the trees, Mark stared at his phone, torn between anger and disbelief. He had always trusted the HOA to keep their community safe and orderly. Now, he wondered if something sinister was unfolding under their very noses. Late that night, unable to sleep, Mark scoured the neighborhood's online forums and Facebook groups. There, he found whispers. People mentioning Karen, the HOA board member known for her overbearing personality and rigid control over the community. Some neighbors hinted she was involved in questionable dealings, but details were murky. Mark's mind raced. Could Karen be behind this? Had she illegally rented out his home? It sounded crazy, almost too bold for a quiet suburban lake community, but the evidence was mounting. Determined to uncover the truth, Mark booked an early flight back, deciding to cut his trip short. He couldn't wait any longer, not with his sanctuary at stake. On the morning of his unexpected return, the sky was overcast, matching the storm brewing in Mark's mind. As he drove down the winding road leading to Crystal Lake, he noticed cars parked along the street, strangers milling about near his house. His pulse quickened. Pulling up to his driveway, Mark's eyes narrowed. The for rent sign he had once proudly displayed had vanished. Instead, a rental ad on his phone showed his very own house available on a popular vacation site, with dates that matched the weekend he was supposed to be away. His jaw clenched. This wasn't just a violation of HOA rules, it was a personal betrayal. Mark stepped onto his porch, the familiar creak of the wood beneath his feet now sounding ominous. From inside, he could hear muffled voices and laughter, unwelcome guests making themselves at home in his absence. Taking a deep breath, Mark pulled out his phone and dialed a number he hadn't wanted to use yet, the sheriff's office. "Something's going on at my lake house," he said firmly. "I think someone from the HOA is illegally renting it out." As he ended the call, the weight of what he was about to face settled heavily on his shoulders. Mark knew this was just the beginning of a fight that would shake his entire community and reveal secrets no one expected. Mark wasn't the only one disturbed by the strange happenings at the lake house. As word spread quietly among the neighborhood, whispers began to ripple like waves on the water. Neighbors exchanged worried glances and hushed conversations, but no one spoke openly. Fear of Karen's influence over the HOA hung heavily in the air. That evening, Mark wandered through the cul-de-sac, hoping to gather more information. He approached Mrs. Patel, an elderly woman who had lived in the community for over 20 years. Her eyes darted nervously as he mentioned his house. "I seen strange cars coming and going at all hours," she said softly. "Last weekend, there was a loud party until midnight, and the people, they don't look like they belong here." Mark nodded, feeling the tension tighten inside him. "Did you report it to the HOA?" Mrs. Patel sighed, lowering her voice. "I tried, but Karen, she's on the board. She's powerful, and she scares people. When I called, they just told me to mind my own business. Some of the others are scared too. Mark's jaw tightened. Karen's grip on the community was stronger than he imagined. That night, Mark's phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from Tom, a neighbor who rarely spoke but had always seemed trustworthy. "Meet me at the park. I have info you need." Curious and cautious, Mark arrived at the empty park under the dim glow of streetlights. Tom was already there, pacing anxiously. "They've been doing this to others," Tom whispered. "Karen's been quietly renting out several homes without owner's permission. She pockets the money and keeps the HOA quiet by threatening anyone who speaks up." Mark felt a chill. The problem was bigger than he thought. This wasn't just about his lake house. It was a corrupt system built on fear and secrecy. "Why haven't you said anything before?" Mark asked. Tom glanced around nervously. "I didn't want trouble. Karen's got connections, and people disappear from meetings when they question her. But now, with your house, well, I think it's time someone stood up." As Mark digested the news, he realized he wasn't alone, but he also understood the risk he was about to take. The next morning, Mark tried to contact the HOA board directly. He sent emails, left messages, even showed up at their office, but every attempt was met with silence or deflection. The receptionist gave him a tight smile and said, "The board is busy." Frustration boiled over. Who was protecting Karen? And how deep did this conspiracy run? Determined, Mark scoured the HOA's online records and bylaws, searching for any loopholes Karen might be exploiting. He found a clause about rental restrictions, but also vague language that seemed ripe for manipulation. Just when he thought he was hitting a dead end, a neighbor slipped him a printed flyer, an anonymous warning about illegal rentals and HOA corruption. The flyer mentioned Karen by name and urged residents to demand transparency. Mark felt a flicker of hope, but hope was fragile. That evening, as Mark walked back to his lake house, he noticed a car parked nearby, engine running. The driver, a woman with sharp eyes, watched him intently. Mark's heart pounded. Was this a warning? A threat? He quickened his pace, glancing over his shoulder. Whoever she was, Karen's influence was watching him already. Back inside his house, Mark locked every door and window, but the unease stayed. The peaceful lake retreat he once loved was now a battleground. He knew he couldn't back down, not now, not ever. As the night deepened, Mark stared out at the dark water, vowing to expose Karen and reclaim his home, no matter the cost. Karen wasn't just any HOA board member. To many, she was the face of the neighborhood, a woman who commanded attention the moment she entered a room. Always impeccably dressed, with perfectly styled hair and a sharp, calculating smile, she projected power and control. But beneath the polished surface lurked a woman willing to bend and break the rules for her own gain. Mark soon learned this the hard way. As he dug deeper, he discovered Karen's reputation stretched far beyond petty HOA disputes. Rumors swirled about her involvement in shady deals, backroom politics, and a knack for intimidating anyone who dared cross her. Neighbors who had once admired her now whispered warnings. "She's dangerous," one said. "She'll do whatever it takes to protect her little empire." But Karen's charm was her greatest weapon. At community meetings, she presented herself as the guardian of neighborhood values, firm but fair, the voice of reason. Yet behind closed doors, her tactics were ruthless. One afternoon, Mark received an unexpected call from Lisa, a fellow homeowner and former friend of Karen's. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "I don't want to get involved, Mark, but you need to know. Karen's been illegally renting out homes, your lake house included. She's making thousands on the side, and if you push back, she'll make life miserable for you." Mark's blood ran cold. He asked, "Why hasn't anyone stopped her?" Lisa hesitated. "She's got the HOA wrapped around her finger. People are afraid to speak out. Some have already tried and faced harassment, false complaints, or worse." Determined to get to the bottom of it, Mark started attending HOA meetings undercover. He watched Karen in action, how she dismissed questions with practiced ease, how she smoothed over concerns with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. At one meeting, Mark overheard a tense exchange between Karen and another board member, Jim. Karen's tone was icy. "You'll do as I say, Jim. Don't forget who controls the budget." Jim swallowed hard but nodded. Mark realized Karen's influence was more than personal charisma. It was control through fear and manipulation. That night, Mark found rental contracts tucked away in Karen's files. Contracts with fake names, short-term leases that blatantly violated HOA policies. She had rented out multiple homes, pocketing rent payments and covering her tracks with forged documents. Mark's frustration turned to fury. This wasn't just about his property anymore. Karen's greed was poisoning the entire community. But Karen was no fool. She sensed the storm brewing and began a campaign to discredit Mark. Rumors circulated that he was unstable, that he was causing trouble for personal gain. Friends turned wary, neighbors whispered behind his back, yet Mark refused to be silenced. One evening, as he returned home from gathering more evidence, Mark noticed his tires had been slashed, a clear warning. He stared at the shredded rubber, anger and determination burning in his eyes. Karen thought she could scare him away, but Mark was just getting started. The battle lines had been drawn, and Mark was ready to fight, for his home, for his neighbors, and for the truth. Mark's early morning return to his lake house was supposed to be a relief, a chance to reclaim the peace he thought was lost. Instead, it marked the beginning of the biggest shock he had ever faced. The neighborhood was quiet, but something felt off. As he approached his front porch, Mark noticed fresh tire tracks in the dirt, ones that hadn't been there before. His heart raced. Pushing open the front door, he was hit by a wave of unfamiliar scents: cologne, cigarette smoke, the faint odor of fast food. The house was no longer his sanctuary. It had become a rented party pad for strangers. Mark stepped inside cautiously. The living room was a mess. Empty bottles cluttered the coffee table, cushions thrown across the floor, a TV left blaring a late-night show. His belongings were disturbed, his fishing rods knocked over, a framed family photo cracked. Then came the worst moment, voices from upstairs. He crept quietly toward the stairs, tension knotting his stomach. Upstairs, through the cracked door of his master bedroom, Mark spotted two strangers sprawled on his bed, laughing and scrolling on their phones. His voice caught in his throat. Who are you?" The couple jumped up, startled and defensive. One quickly grabbed their bags. "We rented this place online," the woman said nervously. "Someone told us it was available for a weekend." Mark's blood boiled. "This is my home. I never agreed to rent it out." They exchanged uneasy glances, clearly unaware of the storm they'd walked into. Mark's phone buzzed. A new message from the rental site. He opened it and froze. His lake house was listed online, complete with pictures, amenities, and a calendar showing bookings spanning several weeks. The name of the host? Karen Matthews. The realization hit like a punch to the gut. He was not just a victim of a random scam. The HOA board member he suspected was the mastermind behind this illegal racket. Mark knew he had to act fast. He called the HOA office again, this time demanding answers. His calls were ignored, emails unanswered. The board was stonewalling him, protecting Karen at all costs. Feeling cornered, but not defeated, Mark reached out to his lawyer, explaining the situation in detail. "Mark, this is serious," the lawyer said gravely. "If Karen has been illegally renting your property and others, you have a strong case. But you need proof and official complaints filed immediately." Mark's determination sharpened. He set up a hidden camera inside his living room, hoping to catch the renters or anyone coming and going. He also printed out the rental listings and compiled screenshots. Meanwhile, the renters downstairs had no idea the chaos swirling above them. They thought they had found a perfect weekend getaway. But Mark's presence shattered their illusion. That night, Mark sat on his porch, watching the house like a hawk. He felt exposed, vulnerable, but also more resolved than ever. He had to expose Karen, not just for his own sake, but for everyone in the community. As the wind rustled the leaves, Mark's phone vibrated again. It was a text from an unknown number. "Stop digging. You don't know who you're dealing with." A chill ran down his spine. The battle was no longer just about a house. It was about power, secrets, and survival. And Mark was ready to face it head-on. Mark's fight had moved from private frustration to a public battle. But what he didn't expect was how deep Karen's reach truly was, and how far she would go to silence him. After the threatening text, Mark tried to keep a low profile. He continued documenting every suspicious activity around his house, but whispers began to spread through the neighborhood, whispers that painted Mark as the troublemaker. One afternoon, as Mark mowed his lawn, his neighbor Jim approached cautiously, eyes flicking nervously over his shoulder. "Mark, I don't know if you should push this," Jim warned. "Karen's got people watching everyone. Some neighbors are getting complaints filed against them for the smallest things." Mark stopped, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Complaints? What kind?" "Noise violations, parking tickets, even petty fines for minor landscaping issues. It's like she's building a case to squeeze people out." The realization hit Mark hard. Karen wasn't just hiding illegal rentals. She was weaponizing the HOA rules to intimidate anyone who challenged her. Despite the warnings, Mark refused to back down. He scheduled a meeting with the HOA board, hoping to confront Karen face-to-face. The room was tense when he arrived. A dozen community members sat in silence, eyes darting between Mark and Karen. Karen greeted him with a cold smile. "Mark, I'm surprised you're still stirring trouble." Mark held up the printed rental listings. "This is illegal, Karen. You've been renting out homes without owner's permission, including mine. You're breaking the law." Karen's smile didn't waver. "These accusations are baseless. You're fabricating stories to undermine the board." Before Mark could respond, Karen launched into a carefully crafted speech about community values, responsibility, and protecting property values. The room seemed torn. Some nodded in agreement, others whispered uneasily. Mark realized Karen's influence ran deep, built on fear and carefully spun lies. After the meeting, things escalated quickly. Anonymous complaints appeared on Mark's door, accusations of noise violations, unauthorized renovations, and worse. His neighbors started avoiding him, wary of being associated with the troublemaker. One night, Mark found a smashed window on his car, a clear message. But Mark wasn't alone. A small group of neighbors, inspired by his courage, reached out to form a coalition. They began collecting their own evidence, sharing stories of Karen's abuses. Together, they planned to take the fight to the authorities. Meanwhile, Karen's tactics grew more desperate. Rumors spread that Mark had a criminal past, that he was trying to scam the community for personal gain. It was character assassination aimed at isolating him. But Mark's resolve only hardened. He contacted the sheriff's office again, sharing his mounting evidence. This time, the deputies listened. An officer promised to conduct a formal investigation into the illegal rentals and HOA misconduct. Late one night, Mark received a phone call from an unknown number. "You're poking a hornet's nest, Mark," the voice warned coldly. "Back off, or you'll regret it." Mark stared at the phone, anger flaring. No threat would silence him. The silent war had begun. The war Mark faced wasn't just against one woman. It was against a fortress of silence and fear built over years. But now, he wasn't fighting alone. The coalition of neighbors Mark had helped form was small but determined. They met in hushed tones at a local coffee shop, sharing their stories and pooling their evidence. Each story added weight to the mounting case against Karen and the corrupt HOA board. Linda, a retired school teacher, handed Mark a folder thick with photos and emails. "Karen's been renting my guest house too," she whispered. "I found payments going into a fake HOA account." Tom, the cautious neighbor who first warned Mark, offered his surveillance footage. "I caught unfamiliar faces entering homes at odd hours. It's not just renting. They're using these places for parties, illegal gatherings." As the pieces fell into place, Mark's determination grew fiercer. He knew they had to present a rock-solid case to the sheriff and, if necessary, take it to court. Mark also reached out to a local journalist known for exposing community corruption. The journalist, intrigued by the story, promised to investigate and shine a spotlight on the scandal. Meanwhile, Mark's hidden cameras captured more illegal activity at his lake house, strangers arriving with rental contracts, loud music blasting late into the night, and deliveries that didn't match the HOA's approved vendors. The sheriff's office finally took notice. Deputies visited the neighborhood, conducting interviews and reviewing Mark's evidence. They warned Karen and the HOA board to cease the illegal rentals immediately. But Karen was not one to surrender easily. Late one evening, Mark received an ominous message on his phone. "Stop this now, or things will get worse." Despite the threats, the coalition pressed on. They organized a community meeting, this time not under Karen's control, but in a neutral location where everyone could speak freely. The turnout surprised even Mark. Dozens of neighbors showed up, many for the first time willing to speak out. Stories of harassment, intimidation, and illegal activities filled the room. The air buzzed with a mix of fear, hope, and resolve. Karen's name came up repeatedly, no longer whispered but shouted in anger and frustration. The community was beginning to break free from her hold. Mark knew the climax was near. The next steps would determine whether justice would prevail or if Karen's reign would continue unchecked. But just as things seemed to be turning in his favor, Mark found one last shocking piece of evidence, a document linking Karen directly to a secret offshore account where the rental profits were deposited. The betrayal was staggering. Karen had used their community's trust and their homes as her personal ATM. Mark stared at the document, heart pounding. This was the proof they needed. The final confrontation was inevitable. The community meeting had set the stage for a reckoning. Mark stood at the front of the crowded room, his heart pounding as he prepared to reveal the final piece of the puzzle. Faces in the audience reflected a mix of anger, fear, and hope, their quiet suffering ready to erupt into action. Karen entered late, her confident smile slipping as she took in the packed room and the hostile atmosphere. Her eyes locked on Mark, icy and calculating. "I'm here to clear the air," Karen began, her voice smooth but strained. "These accusations are baseless, and anyone who spreads lies will face consequences." Mark held up the document, the damning proof of her offshore account. "This isn't lies, Karen. This is evidence. You've been profiting from illegally renting out our homes, including mine. You've used our trust as a business." The room erupted. Neighbors shouted in disbelief and outrage. Karen's facade cracked as she tried to regain control, but the tide had turned. Suddenly, a knock on the door silenced the crowd. Two uniformed sheriffs stepped inside. "We're here to serve a warrant," one said. "Karen Matthews, you're under investigation for fraud, illegal rental activities, and misuse of HOA funds." Karen's face drained of color. She glanced around desperately, but there was no escape. The deputies began to explain the charges as Karen's supporters scrambled to defend her, but the overwhelming evidence was undeniable. Mark watched as the woman who had terrorized his community for years was finally held accountable. It wasn't just a personal victory, it was a triumph for every homeowner who had suffered in silence. As Karen was escorted out, the neighbors erupted into cheers, but Mark knew this was only the beginning. The aftermath would be messy, legal battles, damaged reputations, and the long road to healing. Yet, for the first time in years, the community felt a flicker of hope. Mark looked around at the faces of his neighbors, no longer afraid, but ready to rebuild. The courtroom was packed as Karen's trial began. The evidence Mark and the coalition gathered was overwhelming. Photos, documents, testimonies, all painting a picture of greed, betrayal, and manipulation. But just when Mark thought the nightmare was over, an unexpected twist rocked the entire community. During cross-examination, Karen's defense attorney dropped a bombshell. Karen was not acting alone. She claimed that several other board members were involved in the scheme, and that a secret network had been profiting from illegal rentals and HOA fund skimming for years. The courtroom murmured. Mark felt a cold chill run down his spine. The corruption went deeper than he imagined. Whispers of accomplices began circulating. One by one, more names surfaced. Some neighbors who once stayed silent started coming forward, confessing they had been pressured or bought off. The investigation expanded, sweeping through the HOA like a storm. New arrests were made, and reforms were forced onto the board. Mark's battle had sparked a revolution. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed the community. Mark stood with his neighbors, proud but weary. They had won a hard-fought victory, but the road ahead was long. In the weeks that followed, the HOA restructured under new leadership. Transparency and community engagement became the new priorities. The lake house, once a symbol of betrayal, was restored and returned to Mark's family. As peace settled over the neighborhood, Mark reflected on everything he'd been through: the threats, the isolation, the tire slashing, the broken trust. But in the end, he had done more than protect his home. He had helped save his entire community. One evening, as Mark sat on his porch watching the sun dip below the lake, his phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. "Thank you. We couldn't have done it without you." Mark smiled, the weight of the past months lifting. The battle had changed him. He was no longer just a homeowner, he was a guardian of his community's future. And one thing was clear: no Karen, no corrupt board could ever take that away again.